military intelligence is the key to war. Without it, you cannot win. A quote from the famous Sun Tzu that's still rung very true even in the Universal Century. Or perhaps I should say, especially the Universal Century thanks to the Minovsky particle. In addition to being used in a multitude of weapons, spreading this particle severely impacted long-range combat and communication, and even lowered visibility. Meaning that combat had once again become much closer, and also meaning that intelligence therefore had to be obtained at much closer ranges. But when it came to the machines with which they would gather this intelligence, we saw two very different approaches between the Federation and Zeon. The Federation, with all of its industrial might, would mainly focus on dedicated recon units, with its most famous machine being the Dish. Unfortunately, due to the aforementioned Minovsky particles, many of its more advanced features were severely hindered. So for better dishes, the Federation would have been better off turning to today's sponsor, Factor. They deliver fresh, chef-made meals directly to your door without any Minovsky interference. And not only are they healthy, but they're also fast to prepare, just pop them in the oven for 2 minutes, and they're also super flexible. You can choose from a weekly rotating menu consisting of over 27 meals and over 33 add-ons, featuring something for everyone. I've got my eyes on that cheesy bacon ranch shredded chicken. Meal plans go from 4 to 18 meals a week, which can be easily modified, and you can even skip a week if you want. So if you want to try the amazing and healthy food that Factor has to offer, you can use my link down below, or go to go.factor75.com and use the code FACTOR SE43456. Not only will you get 50% off of your first box, but you'll also be supporting the channel. Zeon then was in a much tougher spot, because they also needed to gather intelligence, but with the Federation's overwhelming numbers, they also needed every machine to be able to fight. So when the 1-year war broke out, Zeon simply reassigned about 30 Zaku Is as recon units and called it a day. But despite not being upgraded for the task in any way, they proved to be a great success. Before their deployment, some had voiced their opinion that using Zakus for recon would be a waste of resources. But the intel that these Zaku Is had brought back would prove invaluable for Zeon's early victories, and also showed another major advantage of using mobile suits for recon. Again, due to Minovsky particles, long-range communication was nearly impossible. So in order to deliver the intel, the recon units also had to get back, and Zakus had excellent survivability rates. And so development began on Zeon's first dedicated reconnaissance mobile suit, the MS-06 Zaku II Reconnaissance type. At first it was based on the C type, but around the time that it was ready for mass production, Zeon had moved on to the F type. So as a result, it would be further modified to be rolled out on the F-type's assembly lines. But it is also believed that a few units with the C-type specifications were still made. And another thing that had changed by that time was its model number. Zeon had decided to begin standardizing them, so it was changed from RMS-06 to the MS-06E. And unlike the Zaku ones before it, this machine would see some pretty major changes. In order for the machine to be able to make a quick escape, it got an upgraded backpack based on that of the S-type, 2 high-powered rocket thrusters on the chest, and extra verniers. And for data gathering, it received special sensors and cameras on the crotch and shoulders, and a brand new head. It had an antenna on the left side, an oversized and much more powerful mono eye, and the cables were now directly connected to the backpack, presumably due to the power requirements of this new mono eye. For handheld equipment then, on the one hand, these recon types were still required by the top brass to be able to use standard Zaku weaponry in case of emergency, but they would most often be seen with their own dedicated camera gun. which, as the name implies, is basically a mobile suit-sized camcorder. Other changes then were a 10% increase in fuel capacity and a specialized G-resistant normal suit for the pilot. It is also said that many pilots for these machines weren't mobile suit pilots, but X-fighter pilots instead. And this was because the focus of these Recon-type Zakus wasn't combat, even though, again, they were capable of this in case of emergency, but rather to gather information and to make it back alive, something that Zeon believed X-fighter pilots would be better at. And at the same time, it would also ensure that their skilled mobile suit pilots were on the front lines, actually doing the fighting. And again, these machines would prove to be an immense success. Around 100 units were made, and it wasn't just Zeon who noticed how good these things were. After the war ended, the Federation would requisition quite a few of these and began to extensively use them for themselves, with some units even serving well into the Grips War. And while they looked almost identical, they did get a few notable changes. The left arm got a mounting hardpoint for a shield, the sensors and thrusters were upgraded, and the cockpit was outfitted with a linear seat. In the latter half of the war then, a successor unit would be produced, the MS-06E3 Zaku Reconnaissance type, although it would quickly get the nickname Zaku Flipper thanks to its new backpack. This was completely redesigned and now featured 6 fin-like laser, ultrasound and Minovsky particle sensors that made flipping motions while they were active. And the other major change was the head, something that now made it look even more different from the standard Zaku. Instead of a single mono eye, it now had a triple sensor that was also on a pivot joint so that it could quickly swing back, allowing the Zaku Flipper to almost instantaneously analyze and record the things happening behind it. One optional piece of equipment then that was often used by the Flipper, but could also be used by the standard Recon types, was the Buzz Norse, a specialized booster unit that also came with extra fuel tanks. This granted the unit extra speed, and again explains why Zeon went with X-fighter pilots for these Zakus. Unfortunately though, due to a combination of high costs and it being introduced late into the war, only 16 standard Recon types would be converted into Zaku Flippers. But that didn't mean they didn't have an impact on the war. Before the Battle of Abawaku, Zaku Flippers were responsible for scouting Rebel's fleet, and it is said that their intelligence played an important role in Giren's decision to use the solar ray. And after the war, just like the standard Recon types, surviving units would be requisitioned by the Federation, modernized, and put into service, like the unit used by Titan's pilot Ethelbert Hincapie. And supposedly, Zeon also further developed the Flipper into the MS-06E+, known as the Hawkeye. And rather than a simple upgrade, it's safe to say that this was almost a complete rework of the concept. To focus even harder on its speed, and therefore also its survivability, its legs and torso were taken directly from the high mobility Saikomu Zaku. As for its sensors, they were also completely reworked. Instead of a handheld camera gun, its forearms now had high-precision digital cameras built in. Although there were still some units with regular forearms, it had 3 optical sensors on each shoulder, as well as 3 chaff launchers. On the backpack, it had 4 long-range scanning blades and 2 anti-radar blades, and finally, its eye sensor was replaced with a main Megamix panoramic eye. One unit is known to have carried out reconnaissance at Solomon, right before the Federation's attack, and another one, possibly the same unit, was active during the Grips War as part of a Zeon Remnant group. Also, it's one of the few mobile suits that was a twin-seater instead of a single-seater. And while this was, technically speaking, where the Zaku Recon types ended, its legacy and influence would be far from over. Not only would their success influence future reconnaissance mobile suits, but their high-powered optical sensors would also become very useful for impromptu sniper mobile suits. The most simple conversion of this nature was the MS-06L Zaku II sniper type, used by Helena Hagel of the Noisy Fairy Squadron. But despite the different name and model number, not too much had actually been modified about this machine, because it was simply one of the early Recon types that was still based on the C-types, with some extra dust proofing for the joints for operations on Earth, the shoulder and crotch sensors removed, a shield on the left shoulder, and its main weapon now was a new custom-made conventional sniper rifle. And the unit would see action on the North American front. Another simple conversion was the unit of Lindsay Shimizu, who used whatever she could get her hands on to turn her Zaku into an ad hoc sniper machine. The sniper rifle was modified from a Magella top cannon, the chest had a stabilizer, and the head was replaced with that of a Recon type, giving it an accurate firing range of up to 15 kilometers. A more heavily customized version then was the MS-05L Zaku I sniper type. As the war began turning against Zeon after Operation Odessa, Zeon needed to make the most use of whatever they still had, and this included their Zaku Is, which were already considered obsolete by the beginning of the war. Which is also why, as you can remember, they were being deployed as recon units. So in order to give them an actual fighting chance, it was decided to turn them into sniper units, something that Zeon was also in desperate need of. Its main weapon was a beam sniper rifle, based on a prototype Gelgoog beam rifle from the California base. It had a new backpack with its own sub-generator to power this beam rifle, and for accuracy, the mono-eye and antenna of the Recon type were installed in its head. Further modifications include slightly revamped armor, a crutch for easier kneeling, and a pair of head-mounted Vulcan guns for close-range defense purposes. And unlike the two customs that we just went over, the Zaku I sniper type was a generally applied modification, and they would also play a major role in slowing down the Federation's advance on Earth. And finally then, we have Jacobius Node's custom Gelgoog cannon. He would first use this unit during the 1-year war, and then upgraded it later on to use the same triple camera module as the Zaku Flipper. And befitting of a sniper unit, it could be seen using a variety of weapons, including a custom beam rifle that also had that triple camera module mounted on it, and the long-range beam rifle that was famously used by the Jim Sniper. And as of UC 0090, both Jacobius and his Gelgoog were still alive and kicking. And the last machine we have to go over is the MS-06S Reconnaissance Zaku II. Zeon began the war with regular mobile suits acting as scouts, and they would also end the war with regular mobile suits acting as scouts. Probably because at this point, they were running low on everything. This Zaku was little more than a standard S-type with a black color scheme and slightly overhauled thrusters, and would be used to monitor the movements of the Federation's fleets. For example, 2 of these units would be responsible for finding out that Rebels' fleet was heading for Abawaku and not for Granada. Also, while most sources agree that this was an S-type variant, there is at least one source that has it listed as an F-type. But to be honest, considering the situation that Zeon was in, I wouldn't be surprised that both S and F-types were quickly overhauled to fill in this role. And if you want to find out more about the S-types and the F-type commander units, you can check out my development history on them, which I'll have linked on screen and down below. For now though, this has been all for the Reconnaissance type Zakus. A machine that was originally considered unnecessary, but would quickly become a trendsetter that would have a big impact on the war, both as a recon unit and as a conversion part for sniper mobile suits. A big thanks to Factor for sponsoring this video. Again, you can use the link down below to give him a shot. Another big thanks to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.